Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Inside Florida Politics Podcast, powered by the USA Today Florida Network. Well, this week, Florida wants to be more badass than ICE. And after years of getting pummeled by the Florida Legislature, LGBTQ advocates are cheering what they said is the defeat of every adverse bill that was presented in this year's session. And Governor DeSantis is stepping up his push for placing some kind of property tax overhaul before voters next year. I'm your host, Antonio Fins, and these are the topics I'll be talking about with my USA Today Florida Network colleagues, Anna Goñi-Lessan and John Kennedy. Well, guys, welcome back. And Anna, we're going to start with you in this whole issue of immigration. It continues to just be the hottest issue out there. Some of our listeners may be thinking, oh, you're talking about immigration again. Well, that's like saying, hey, you're talking about Donald Trump again. Look, this is the issue that's really roiling Florida right now politically in many ways, from workplaces to neighborhoods to communities to churches. And this time around, there's a new twist. Officials in Florida want more resources to detain everyone they stop on our streets, regardless of whether the individual has a criminal background or even a removal warrant or deportation order. Of course, we're talking about people who are undocumented as part of this effort to find people who are illegally in the country and in the state and, detain them and ultimately deport them back to their home countries. There's even some sniping that ICE, a federal agency that's supposed to be in charge of this, is catch and releasing people that they have caught. And Anna, you've been reporting this consistently. So what gives here?
What gives? Antonio, what a great question. There was a meeting this week with the State Immigration Enforcement Council, which is made up of local county sheriffs, right? And in it, they were like, okay, we need to talk directly to President Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, because we're not getting what we need to comply with what DeSantis and what Trump wants, which is kind of bonkers that they're asking for this like direct line. And one of the sheriffs, Grady Judd, he's a Polk County sheriff. He's someone who you've probably heard of before. He's very law and order kind of guy. He's quoted as saying, "I truly don't believe that people are sitting down and looking the president in the eye and telling him exactly what the problem is and how to resolve it."
Well, tell us a second. Let's back up a bit. What are they saying is the hole in the donut here? What are they complaining about? What is
okay. So like we saw Operation Tidal Wave, right? Where we saw over 1,100 people detained, some were removed. What Florida is saying is some people are getting released. What they're also saying is ICE isn't picking everyone up. I'm assuming that not many of our people know how ICE detainers work, because I literally didn't know about this until about a year ago when I started working on this kind of stuff. Is ICE, there's a 48-hour hold, right, in the county jail for ICE to come pick someone up. And if they don't pick someone up, if someone posts bail, they can get let go.
When you say someone pick them up, you mean like some kind of federal agent or who not the family member to be bonded out like anybody else?
No, I mean, there's a bond. And if ICE doesn't come pick them up, I mean, they're put in, the immigration system, but they don't get to an ICE detainer. They don't get sent to an ICE detention facility, right? Okay. So people are being let go.
By the way, you tell our readers that part of the problem there is that they don't seem to have enough space. There's been
so that's where I'm getting, right? Okay. So apparently Sheriff Gualtieri from Pinellas County is saying people are sleeping on the floors. We have the Orange County public safety guy. His name is Mr. Banks. He said that he's nervous because they're getting a bunch of people from other counties. They're coming to Orange County because the Orange County jail is only of several jails that are at can house immigration detainees. And he said that he's afraid that they're going to run out of room.
And we have an issue already in Miami-Dade County where the Chrome Detention Center, there's videos and there's allegations of really horrific conditions, and there's been a few deaths there. So this is, a particularly, serious issue, this question of detention and lack of capacity.
Oh, yeah. And people are getting moved 3, 4, 5 times. I've spoken to immigration attorneys who say their clients are getting moved from one county jail to another county jail to Chrome to another county jail to back to Chrome. And it's really hard for, loved ones to be able to track where their family member is in detention. It's kind of all over the place. It's one of the reasons why DeSantis and other Republican leaders in this immigration sphere want to add, want to waive federal detention standards to create more detention facilities. It's one of the reasons why, you know, they want to be able to waive detention standards. Like they want to be able to set up soft-sided detention cells near airstrips for quicker removal. That was in a 37-page project proposal last week that the executive director of the State Immigration Enforcement Council, Larry Keefe, he put out there. He was like, this is the blueprint. This is Florida. He called it Florida's blueprint for mass deportation. And he said that it's going to be used across the country relatively soon. We'll see if that happens, right? As far as we know, the federal government is still, you know, kind of blocking, the federal agencies, right, are kind of blocking Florida's state law enforcement, Florida's attempts at mass deportation, or Florida's attempts to comply with Trump's mass deportation, as we've seen, as consistently the State Immigration Enforcement Council, these sheriffs have asked to have a direct line to President Trump, because they say that the ICE is not ICE. There was some saying yesterday about like or 2 days ago about the Empire State Building being built by toothpicks, basically, about the structure isn't there, the infrastructure isn't there at ICE to be able to accomplish the things that the governor, that President Trump want. So I don't know, man, things are wild. They're wild.
And they're about to get more wild, because even as we're having this discussion about detention and the lack of detention facilities, and up to now, what they have been talking about, like the Trump administration and the DeSantis administration, and a lot of the local law enforcement across Florida has been really only going after the bad guys, those people that are either have criminal backgrounds or we believe are a threat to the public safety of the state and the country. Even though in some of these roundups, they've also picked up, as we've reported, Anna, a lot of people that don't have criminal backgrounds. But so far, it seems that the talk has been in the priority, shall we say, has been those people who are a public safety threat. But this week, there was a Supreme Court ruling that basically ended the block on the ability of the Trump administration to end temporary protective status for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans. I think the number is 350,000 of them, of which as many as 75% may be living in Florida. So even as you're running into this issue of lack of capacity and detention space, and a quick, efficient, removal of people from the country, there's as many as somewhere in Florida, as many perhaps as 200,000 plus people who are soon going to be under deportation orders. And if you can't really handle the number you've got now, wait till you drop 200,000 people on there. Is this going to basically blow up even the already fraught relationship between the state, ICE, and local law enforcement?
I mean, local law enforcement is already telling them that they're trying to comply with DeSantis's mandate, right? They're trying to do everything they can, and ICE does not have the capacity to respond, meaning that they don't have enough room. What they're asking the federal government for is resources. Now, resources is pretty vague, right? But I can't imagine dropping 200,000 people. That's just, they're having trouble already deputizing law enforcement because it's taking too long. That was the other thing that they wanted to do, right? The other thing they asked for earlier this week was to waive the background checks and the credentialing for 287G, basically designation for law enforcement officers. It's a 40-hour training plus the background check plus the credentialing, and they want to waive it because it's taking too long. So if that's taking too long and there's no beds and they need more resources, adding 200,000 people on top of that, I just don't. I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do, Antonio. They're going to do what they're going to do. But I just imagine that being another huge roadblock if what they're trying to do is take these TPS people, or some of them, and remove them. I just find that it looks like already some law enforcement's over their heads.
Well, you know what? For the past 20 years, some hardliners on immigration have been demanding the deportation of many millions of people. And one of the arguments was always, look, we don't have the resources, the capacity. And it's even if you get to the point where you really believe that this is removing people that are productive in the workforce, that removing them, is somehow in the national interest. You lack the resources, the infrastructure to do so. And I guess now what we're finding out is that in fact those arguments were right all along. But let's move on. Hey, look, we're talking immigration now, but a few years ago it was the state's LGBTQ community that felt it was in the crosshairs of the DeSantis administration. Like, remember that whole battle with Walt Disney World and the disputes over kids at drag shows and drag book reading, drag queen reading sessions. And well, today though, Equality Florida is cheering that every piece of legislation the group deemed a threat was defeated in this year's session. So tell us, Anna, you've been covering this. What was in those bills that were beaten, and what happened that they didn't pass?
So there were a couple bills that stood out more than the others. One of them was the "Don't Say Gay at Work" bill, which that was what critics kind of dubbed it as. It was a bill that would regulate the use of pronouns in the workplace. So it wouldn't require one employee or employer to use the preferred pronouns of an employee, right? That died. We also had a bill that would have banned pride flags on government buildings. That died. I believe that was a bill by Senator Randy Fine, and then he went for Congress, and then that bill was withdrawn because he went for Congress. I don't think anyone else picked that up. So those two bills didn't really go anywhere. Now, that's not to say that they're still not fighting all the other bills that have been passed in several years. Parental rights has really expanded. At first, it was just HB 1557, which was the "Don't Say Gay" bill by critics that prohibited the teaching of sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. That has expanded to K through 12. It's even, you have a lot of parents' rights that have also expanded into healthcare. So it's not like these. There still isn't, I guess, damage per se to the LGBTQ rights of Floridians. But I think with the drama of this year's session, the fact that we still don't have appropriations, these bills were not a priority. They were not a priority this year, obviously, as they didn't get picked up or they died in committee. So.
All right, well, I'm going to bring in John here because he was part of the group that covered a lot of the battles over this in the last 3 or 4 years. Look, John, considering we still have the so-called the "Don't Say Gay" or the parents and education law that Anna just referenced, and that we've had books removed from school and library shelves. Was this a major victory, perhaps a tide-turning event this session, or is it a deal also where the damage has been done? How should this be seen?
Well, there are a lot of laws on the books right now that are seen as pretty hurtful to the LGBTQ community. But the defeats this year, maybe it does say something. Possibly it's that Republicans who dominate the legislature no longer see that much resonance for themselves in these bills, like banning pride flags or Black Lives Matter banners on public buildings. I don't think these issues will ever go away. Because they're being fueled from the top down. The Trump administration animates this anger and seems to get energy from it almost daily. So I think you're hearing a little bit of an echo of the Trump administration in Florida with some of this legislation. It seems like some Florida Republicans, though, are wondering if the reward is worth the effort on some of these attacks. Most of them wind up being, lawsuits, and it's fought over for years at times before they are fully enacted. Maybe the Republicans feel like they've made their point. They feel that that through the laws that they've already passed, and with Trump in the White House, the LGBTQ community, Black Floridians, immigrants, and other minorities feel appropriately isolated and corralled, from their point of view. So maybe Republican leaders have become a little bit more discerning in their discrimination. But this year and last year, to a degree, we saw some of this too. It's been, for those in these communities, it's a little bit of a welcome step off the gas by Republican dominated legislature. So it is a little bit of a tide turn, but will it endure? That's going to be a question mark.
Right. Well, you mentioned the word reward, and nothing's been more rewarding for Republicans in the legislature in the last quarter century than tax cuts and tax reforms and ways to lower the cost of the imposition of taxes across the state. But one area that's kind of vexed the GOP in Tallahassee has been serious efforts at either curtailing or rolling back or somehow phasing out property taxes. I remember, that's been a wish list item since we were getting ready for Y2K and even before that. In fact, I remember then House Speaker designate Marco Rubio. He was going around the state with these blank books and the 100 ideas, and always, when they were getting filled out, it seemed that something to do with property taxes was up high to somehow removing or supplanting some of that property tax money with sales tax, a higher sales tax, or at one point. So there's been all these ideas, but it really hasn't happened other than a slew of constitutional amendments to, increase the homestead exemption for seniors and everybody else every so often. So tell us, here's another push to try to get some kind of major property tax reform before voters in the midterms of 2026. What are they talking about, and really, what are the chances we might actually see something along those lines?
Well, the legislature is on a sort of extended recess right now. The session is still in an extension, which may last until June 30th to settle a state budget and some kind of tax break package. But what we're seeing from DeSantis in recent days, he's been ratcheting up his sales pitch for lawmakers to give him some kind of commitment to a dramatic property tax overhaul. He's taken to social media and recently released a podcast that he conducted in the governor's office, basically saying how local governments have become bloated and free spending with the bounty of property tax revenue that they've collected in recent years, when the state had a red hot housing market that now most people realize is cooling substantially. Some facts support the governor's case. More than $55 billion in property taxes have flowed to counties, cities, school boards, and Florida special districts last year. That's more than double what was collected in 2014. And it's 46% higher than the amount taken in statewide just 4 years ago. This is all according to state data. But that's also a sign that the state is growing, and undoubtedly the demand for local government services has climbed too, with the money flowing in from people's property taxes. Police and fire services are the biggest recipients of these property taxes. So eliminating taxes would, potentially jeopardize community protection if you're going to really endanger what funds police and fire. And that is not something the governor talks much of in his sales pitches. DeSantis too, for all the pitching he's doing right now, it's not that clear exactly what he wants. He'd earlier proposed sending everyone with a homestead exemption a $1,000 check. The legislature ignored that. Now on his podcast, DeSantis says that he's run the numbers, and you could eliminate the property taxes for homesteaded properties in Florida. That's people's prime residence, and cover that loss of local tax money with $300 million that the state could transfer from state funds and distribute to counties, cities, and special districts. I think school taxes in his concept are considered likely to endure. But if not, the school boards would also need a piece of that $300 million too. But, DeSantis makes it sound simple, but that does mean that the state is going to be transferring $300 million to local governments, each year in perpetuity, though to cover that loss. That doesn't really sound like a very sustainable economic model. So all these ideas are still a work in progress, but it's clear that the governor is not dropping the property tax overhaul, even though legislators mostly refused him during the 2 months of the regular session. Here we are in overtime, and he's still throwing out these ideas. So he's not receding from this concept. And in fact, he's stepping it up right now.
Hey, John, so that $300 million in transfer, where would that money come from? The trust funds, remember, we used to raid those trust funds all the time for all kinds of things. Where would it come from?
Yeah, again, he hasn't really articulated, but as he's talked about some of this money, he kind of vaguely refers to the state's reserves. And the state does have billions of dollars in reserves, about $14 billion. So there is money to divert back to local governments. But, the question would be, how long can you do that? It would seem very unlikely that this would be set up as a permanent $300 million transfer of state funds to local governments. Plus, it's kind of complicated for, economic planning and for things to go, into the future for very long. It would seem to be something that just the state could not manage.
Well, John, we've been talking a lot about the governor getting rebuffed by lawmakers a lot this spring and at the session. This seems and has been a steep hill to fight on. What are the chances that the Governor DeSantis actually ekes out a huge W or any kind of win? And this is penultimate session, so to speak.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he's term limited, so that's a factor for the respect that he's getting from legislators, which isn't much. But he can probably wind up with something that he can claim victory on, even if it's some kind of broad commitment from lawmakers that they will work to put something on the November 2026 ballot to eliminate or dramatically reduce property taxes. It's clear the governor wants something. Some kind of payout to property owners. That would be something that he would want faster than waiting for 2026 and the odds of getting it onto a ballot and 60% voter approval, all that goes with it. But, he's acknowledging that since property taxes are in the Florida Constitution, voter approval is going to be needed for something profound and permanent. I'm not sure if his idea of eliminating property taxes for homesteaders and shifting $300 million from the state to cities and counties can be done before the July 1st start of the budget year. DeSantis and House Speaker Daniel Perez are very polarized. And now Senate President Ben Albritton and Perez also are at odds all over the blow up of the state budget negotiations that have brought us into this overtime session now. So given the June 30th deadline for finalizing a state budget, getting something as new and unique as this tax shift idea, which probably could be done without voter approval, getting that shift approved, that may be tough to get going in what is right now a very divided atmosphere in Tallahassee.
Well, it gives us reason to keep an eye on what's happening at the legislature, probably through the end of next month. Anyway, that'll wrap up this week's show. I want to thank our production guru, Rob Landers, for all the great work he does for us and make this podcast happen. I also want to thank all our colleagues across the USA Today Florida network whose work informs what we say, what we do, and what we know. Again, until next time, we'll see you then.